Okay, so welcome everybody to our quarterly update. I mean, we haven't done those in a while, but I'm sure that a lot of our members are going to be curious about what has been going on in the CVA and what has the CVA been active about. Now, the most pressing is, I believe, on the federal regulations. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing with Health Canada?
Let me chime in, Sam, before you take on the answers to that question. So this is year 5 of our program with Health Canada. We've had a very storied history with the Government of Canada and with Health Canada, particularly on Bill S5. We presented in front of the Senate. I think they accepted our advice. We presented in front of the House of Commons Committee. They accepted our advice. We're at the stage right now where regulations are going to be put in place. The problem is, and I don't think this is an excuse so much as it is the reality of what's happening when you deal with so many pieces of legislation that are happening at the same time. Canada right now is the only jurisdiction next to Uruguay, that great thriving country down in South America, that has legalized cannabis. So as a consequence of that, there's a whole host of issues and regulation and laws that need to be drafted to protect Canadians and the industry for cannabis in Canada. So if you tried to find a lawyer in Ottawa right now that was even remotely engaged in our issue, you'd be hard-pressed to find one. So Health Canada has been saying to us, please deal with us on a regular basis. So we've had, over the last number of months, the opportunity to directly engage with Health Canada on what we call a quarterly update, which really does happen every quarter. We had one in the early part of September, and our next one is in early December. We talked directly with the Director General and his team, and much of the expectation on the part of Health Canada and us as CVA is that we're dealing particularly on the issues of the regulations.
And yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, our last quarterly scheduled meeting with Health Canada, we met with the Director General, James Van Loon himself, and we met with Tolga Yalkin, who's the Director General for the Consumer Product Safety Directorate, and it was a very fruitful meeting. At our first meeting, we've outlined some of the concerns in regards to, of course, vaping standards and some of the improvements that we can make as provided guidance and, of course, our feedback from the industry on how we can improve regulations, right? So some of the measures we did talk about is, of course, creating a certification program, right, to address the standards of the vaping industry. So we've reached out and talked about the hardware regulations of Underwriters Laboratory, what they've created in terms of standards, and how could we look into making products safer for consumers to use. We talk about labeling and packaging requirements as well, because currently, as we know that CCCR compliance doesn't really pertain to e-liquids, and we suggested that to Health Canada, and they have now looking into drafting regulations where CCCR compliance pertaining to e-liquids is something that would come out in 2019. And of course, youth prevention program. This is something that's very important, as we know that protecting youth and getting access to vaping products is a very important topic of discussion with Health Canada. And we do know that youth prevention programs will be coming out in 2019, and we're looking to work with Health Canada to address those issues and, of course, educate parents, teachers, and all Canadians on the safety of vaping and how it is really geared towards the smokers.
And on that point, because I think it's a good point, Boris, that Sam is making, we've been very clear with Health Canada. We support the issue that we have to restrict access to vaping products to those under the age of majority. So we've been very clear, and we've been very supportive. Actually, it was CVA, and I think our members know this intuitively, and if they don't, they should, that CVA actually got lots and lots of credit from Health Canada and governments across the country on the exercise we did on making sure that we have good standards and processes in place so that we card people who are we suspect are below the age of majority and deny access, and even on internet sales as well when they're delivered to homes. There's a very rigid process that CVA has put in place, and we're getting a lot of credibility from governments across Canada for the work that we've done that way.
Absolutely, and during that quarterly update with Health Canada, they also did mention that they do understand that the online sales can be protected, ensuring that these products don't get in the hands of kids. And digital proof is something that they're looking to implement, which is already implemented in terms of in Ontario here, how you purchase liquor, how you would get your passport shipped to your house if you were to renew your passport, and of course how cannabis sales online would be monitored and ensure that these products don't get in the hands of kids.
Can we talk about that a little bit more? So when you're talking about digital proof, is it the signature at the door, or do you have
So
to install
every package that gets shipped out it goes directly to the postal outlet and require you to pick up. And upon pickup, you would need to verify your identity, right? And not only verify your identity, but verify your age at the same time. So this is something that they've mentioned that they would look into implementing for 2019, because they ensure that, as we know, we can protect. There's measures in place in Canada where we can ensure that these products don't get in the hands of kids through online sales, but at the same time, we can't ensure that from happening if you were to acquire products from the U.S. So that is something that Health Canada is also looking into, and how could we protect our borders a little bit more to ensure that limited access to youth every measure in place is being taken.
So now I know the CVA has been extremely proactive in preventing youth access and has been a good partner to Health Canada. I mean, we've had that initiative of 19 plus signs before it was even in discussion by Parliament. So now I understand that in that spirit, the federal government is looking to curb lifestyle advertising and put other advertising restrictions. Can you talk a bit about more what's coming down the line on that front for our members?
So lifestyle advertising and promotion on a federal level, this is of course under the federal level. You can still have lifestyle advertising and promotion as long as the channel that you're advertising is adult only. So for example, like an adult only publication that's going to an adult, that's still going to be allowed. The only, of course, on advertising and lifestyle promotion, it will be restricted. So you won't be able to advertise on television or newspaper or magazines that are available to purchase at a bookstore or a convenience store. Those are going to be limited. So I think, I think as an industry, we have to realize that, any measures to ensure youth uptake is being provided and being looked at. So, but we still going to be able to advertise and promote, but of course there's going to be guidelines to that.
And that's something that we, as CVA, we embraced right away. I don't know if you remember, but when we presented to the House of Commons Committee, the Minister's office had said, we'd like to present in advance of you. And she made it very clear that this is an issue that she knows that CVA holds near and dear to its heart, about making sure that lifestyle and the attractiveness to youth is prohibited. And people don't necessarily understand this. It's our duty, I think, as the association that speaks on behalf of the industry, to enlighten people that when you look at the Tobacco and Vape Products Act, it's written prohibitively. So you shall not do these things. And those are the kinds of, oftentimes people they think, well, that's too, it's too restrictive, but it's done so that these kinds of things are held very closely by not only politicians but by lawmakers who have wanted to make sure that there is no access to youth, and the promotion or the lifestyle is not made attractive to youth. So we're very, very clear at CVA that we support that.
I know some members of the industry got a little bit too excited and published the draft statements, authorized statements that came down. When do you think, so number one is can you do that? And number two is, when are the actual authorized statements going to come out?
Well, during our last meeting with Health Canada, they did state that it is a top priority for this quarter to have those relative risk statements available for the industry to use. And I think, I have seen, and of course, a lot of vape shops are very enthusiastic about the messages, and a lot of people are using them. But those messages are not approved yet. The Health Canada has reached out to the public through a consultation process to review these statements. So we will probably see those statements come out very shortly. I think one of the key top priorities from Health Canada is to allow us to use those statements. They mentioned in our meeting that their goal is, of course, is to let people know the truth, that vaping is a less harmful alternative, and that these statements shouldn't be kept away from Canadians to know, and of course smokers. So we will be allowed to use those statements soon, and I think the guideline is that you can, as an industry, we can use those statements to promote vaping, but we can't use those statements to sell product or to promote stores, right? So I think a lot of we've seen where some stores have used those statements to promote their shops. I think when those statements are approved, I think Health Canada will come out with a proper guideline to educate the vape industry on how we could use those statements.
So till now, wait and see, basically.
Absolutely. So we should see those statements to come out shortly.
Now, there's another layer of restrictions on advertising and promotion, which is on the provincial level. So recently, Ontario came out with its guidelines of registering a store, and obviously the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. And I know there's still some questions about whether you have to block out the entire store, or there's still clarity that we're seeking. Right?
So if I could, so this is done. We were working very closely with the previous government up till the call of the election, and virtually almost hours before the election call in May of this year, the government released the regulations. We were not very pleased with the regulations as the previous government had initiated them, and we're quite encouraged when the government had changed that there was a move to review those regulations with a mind to maybe augmenting in favor of what we had talked to the ministry and to the minister's office about. So here we are now. The government had taken over 100 days to review the regulations as they existed in May of this year. And we put ourselves in the position to be very, very forceful and very vocal about changes we wanted to see. And so as a consequence of that, one of the changes that we did want to see was that if you were going to go down this path of making a switch from smoking a cigarette to a vape product, it should be done in a facility, in a location where, as Sam had said earlier on, they're qualified to give advice or detail to the customer on that certain process or action. And so that's done, and now we've got in the regulations the ability for customers to sample in stores, which is a very large win for the industry. There are still some questions, and the Ministry of Health in the province of Ontario has said to us, well, what's best for us to do with you as an association is to gather all of those questions together, which we've done, and let's present that to the Ministry of Health for clarification. So there are some concerns. We still have a process. They've been released or posted, the regulations, so they are coming into effect. But there's obviously a period of time where they'll actually be implemented, and we're working with the province of Ontario to make sure that all of the questions and concerns that members have are put forward.
So I know there's also the specialty vape shop registration that came down the pipeline in Ontario. When is that effective, and how long do people have time to comply?
The specialty vape shop registration is effective immediately. Right now, there isn't a deadline to when to submit your registration, but we encourage all vape shops to do so immediately in Ontario, to get registered. So if you don't have that information, we can definitely provide you the information. You can email us at info@thecva.org, and we can send you all the information that you require, because you would need to register with every, depending on your area, you would need to register with your local health unit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I know that on Ontario's side as well, we fought very hard to, allow it in convenience stores and maximize the access to vapors, but I understand there's been some pushback from the ministry regarding...
Well, if I could talk about that a bit, Boris, one of the things we did say was, look, our fight is not with convenience stores. Our fight is really with making sure that we don't get labeled as promoting this to youth. And unfortunately, in a convenience store, unless you've got infrastructure, and we've been saying that to the convenience store folks, that unless you could put infrastructure where you could restrict access to a particular part of your convenience store to a vape shop, then we think it's probably wise for vape product shops to be the location to get your vape product. So that message was made very loud and clear. Sean and I had a meeting with the minister's office, and they took copious notes, and I think that was probably reflected in the regulations, because we haven't seen that originally that display and promotion was something that would be available in a convenience store. You know, one of the issues that we've had lots of concerns about are the points that have been raised in the United States by the FDA on this, and so this speaks volumes to. Again, the regs are done to restrict access, and I think that we've been very clear at CVA that we support that, restricting access. So I think if convenience stores were going to put themselves in the position to enhance their existing infrastructure to restrict access, then it's not hidden to youth, then it's not hidden behind a power wall. And I think that makes a heck of a lot of sense, and we're very happy to talk to convenience stores about how that.
So I understand that. So the main pushback from the ministry is that these are not 19 plus areas, and
Correct.
you have kids in there, and you can't necessarily vet people in advance, and therefore
Correct.
displaying. Okay. So that brings me to Quebec then. I mean, that's kind of the other side of it could go as nice as Ontario, and sometimes it could go wrong as Quebec. So do you have any updates about our current legal battle there, and where this is?
We do. We have a scheduled Supreme Court date in December.
Supreme Court of Quebec.
So Supreme Court of Quebec in December. So you know, it is coming. You know, this is something that we've been. You know, the litigation has. You know, it's been a couple years now since we. I guess.
Been at this fight, right?
Well, let me help you out a bit here. We have a charter, and our charter spells out very clearly the rights of people in this country. There's a section in that charter called Section 7. Anybody who understands anything about the law or public policy knows that you can fight on worthwhile causes using Section 7 of the Charter. Section 7 of the Charter, for all intents and purposes, says if there's a viable option for something that's healthier as a choice, then it should be promoted to you. In the province of Quebec, they deemed vaping as if it was smoking. We have a problem with that because it's not. And the Minister of Health nationally even ripped off our lines when we said that science is catching up with vaping. Vaping, the Royal College of Physicians in the UK said that it's infinitely safer. We don't use safer, but it's infinitely less harmful to vape than it is to smoke. Quebec didn't do that. So we challenged it based on Section 7. We think we have a case. Our legal counsel thinks that we have a case. We're at the stage right now, and I think this is something that our members across the country ought to know, that there's a change in government. And we speak quite regularly with our contacts inside the government of Quebec, both at the bureaucratic level and at the political level. And we think that there could be some movement in advance of our Supreme Court hearing. We don't know, but we're at the stage right now where there could be a new dynamic here. But at the end of the day, we're looking at this to think that we've got a good case and it will fundamentally change regardless of the outcome. But I think, Sam, one of the appeals that we wanted to make was that this is a costly exercise for us.
Absolutely. And I think, we want to reach out to our Quebec membership, and the Quebec vaping industry is, of course, being able to retain, of course, a lawyer, and we've been through this stage for a couple of years now, that it is an expensive journey, and if we can, we are going to prepare a fundraising campaign to raise the funds to, of course, to fund the litigation. And of course, we've got John Exudis, who's our chair of Quebec. He will be leading a team with Daryl, our executive director, and we're going to do a membership drive in Quebec to encourage the vape industry in Quebec. This is the time that we need to unite as an industry. And I think it's really important to let everyone know, even in Canada, the rest of the vaping community, that a win in Quebec will of course set a precedence that vaping isn't smoking, and and I think the federal government has has come up with regulations to show that, and why is Quebec regulating vaping under tobacco, right? So this is something that we need to change, and I think we need to reach out to the whole, not only just Quebec, but the whole Canadian vaping community, that we need to be a part of this.
I'm sure a lot of our members, the e-juice manufacturers and people who export to Quebec would appreciate the market softening up a little bit.
Absolutely.
I think it's a little bit, it's going to be tough for the Quebec government to reconcile their position with Health Canada's position, who recently came out with very explicit positive statements, such as nicotine does not cause cancer, e-cigarettes have the potential of being a smoking cessation device, and they're definitely less harmful than smoking. So I think it's headed in the right direction.
It is, but again, I want to be very clear too that we do have a constitution, and under our constitution there are activities and processes that are afforded or accorded to the federal government and to the provincial governments under two different parts of the constitution. So Quebec is really, for all intents and purposes, exerting their constitutional right to do what they're doing. We just have to put better messages forward, and I think that our legal counsel is giving us very good signs that we could have something very positive happen.
You mentioned a couple of board members. So we've recently had an election, right? We have a couple of new board members that joined. I'm personally excited about the communications chair, Shai, that joined in. I really think we have an A team right now. Can you talk a little bit more about who, restructuring new positions, who's in which position?
Sure. So we recently have two new board members, which is Shai Beckman. He's involved, of course, with Communications Committee. And it's very exciting. Shai brings a lot of knowledge in regards to, he is, one of the leaders in Ontario when it comes to vape retail shops. He has extremely knowledgeable in regards to, of course, technology and helping us redevelop our website, which is very important, how we communicate with Canadians and, of course, with the vape industry. And of course, we have David Richmond Peck, who's in charge, who is actually our new membership committee chair as well. So David will be working very closely with John Exudis, who's our chair for Quebec, to, of course, increase our membership. And I think, us as an industry, we really need to be united. I think if we understand on some of the oppositions that don't like vaping, they are much more stronger united than we are. So I think we need to kind of reach out and let everyone know that this is a ongoing commitment. This is something that's ongoing, for a very long time, right? So just because if the regulations are now set in stone moving forward, doesn't mean that there's nothing else to do. There's a lot more we need to do, such as public relations. How do we promote vaping to smokers and to Canadians to let them understand that this is something that's less harmful? And I think our government's acknowledging that, and I think we need to do more. We'll generate more awareness out there.
The other thing too, Boris, and I think this is something that as CVA we've made very clear, even at the outset. We said we're going to work with government. This is a highly regulated marketplace, so you have no choice but to deal with government.
Absolutely.
They're holding themselves out as the arbiter on good prohibitive or common sense regulation and laws. Every province, with the exception of two, have already gone down a path. We've made it clear as an association that has national scope that we want to work with government, and I think that's paid dividends for us, Sam. So as a consequence of that, I think Sam's point about making sure that we're united, we can't hold ourselves out as civil libertarians. We have to be able to, and we've said this from the start, we have to be able to embrace good regulation, and I think we've done that. And as a consequence of that, we get good traction from governments across the country. And I'm very pleased at how we've matured as an industry and how we've matured as an association to deal effectively with regulators.
So, what do you think is up ahead as far as the federal government and taxation, the elections? How are these things going?
Well, I'm quite pleased to talk about this because I think it's something that members in the industry should be very proud of. This association in particular has, we're now not just a curiosity. People are saying, how did you do this? So I think it's important that Canadians and those people who vape see that the association that's really the voice of this has had so much traction and success, I'll say, that other countries are starting to look at what we've done in Canada and want to emulate that in their countries. Let me give you these as 3 tangible examples. India, the government of India is looking at changing its focus on vaping, and they're actually coming here in 2 weeks to visit with us. And so our Government Relations Committee and Sean Casey, as our president, will be sitting down with folks from the government of India to look at how we could help them to maneuver their regulatory regime to reflect the new trend in vaping in India. Argentina is looking at working with us. Chile is looking at working with us, and so are some Caribbean nations about how we did what we did here in Canada. So I'm really encouraged about that. One of the big things I think that came about as a consequence of what we've done in Canada is how the United States, including the FDA boards, are looking at how effective we've been here in this country on, you talked about relative risk statements, on not promoting vaping to youth. Those are the kinds of things that the FDA has said, how can we look to Canada as a model? And so we showed some leadership as CVA, and we've joined forces with 3 organizations in the US that are in the vaping space, and we've created a North American Vapor Alliance, NAVA we call it. So that NAVA is now, we've instituted it, Sam, and we're looking at creating some programs for the future.
I understand there's a summit coming for NAVA as well.
That's right. Yes, there's a summit that's coming. I think it's a great opportunity, of course, to get the minds from not only the United States but in Canada as well to kind of work very closely together to explore on how we can actually make the industry better. And I think we've done a great job here in Canada working with government, and I think we have the mindset of going in there and ensure that we understand what the government's role is, right? Is to not only protect consumers and ensure these products are safe, but to also to make sure that they protect businesses, right? So, and I think creating a standard and creating guidelines for us, and being able to work with the government, we're really showing the industry all over the world that Canada, the Canadian vaping industry is working with the government to create standards and to give them input and ideas on how we can ensure that we protect consumers and protect kids as well. So this is a really great summit. I believe, Mark, the summit is going to happen sometime in spring of 2019.
And what we want to do, Boris, is have a summit in the U.S. and a summit in Canada. So you look for that, and obviously, as we move forward with potential dates, we're going to make sure that everybody's apprised.
That's phenomenal. Thanks, you guys. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you,
Sam.
Boris.
Thanks,
See
Boris.
you in 3 months.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Yeah,
It's good to see you too.